I took a bunch of blocks from these Fabric Café books and combined them to make this show-stopping quilt. Let me show you how to make it. Hi, it's Fran Morgan with Fabric Café. Last year we did a video where we took lots of blocks from different patterns and combined them into one amazing quilt. Well, we're doing it again. I pulled quilt blocks from several of our books and designed a new Showstopper quilt. Now this beauty of a quilt is what we are calling our Showstopper 2025. Now what we've done here is we have taken 3 books that were published in 2024 and we've pulled blocks out of them to combine them and make this beauty here. All right, so let's go through some of these blocks and the books that we used. The first block that we use that's in each corner is from our Quick Christmas book, and that is our Yuletide block here, and it is in each corner of the quilt. The second block we used was also from Quick Christmas, and it was from our Irish Christmas quilt, and it is this block right here. And isn't it cool how this is just rotated to create this neat pattern? Okay, now the next book that we used was Double Focus, and this was a great book, and it has some good blocks in it, and it's kind of cool. It kind of gets hidden in here, but this block right here is from our Tempo quilt. And we've just rotated it and it creates, once again, this really cool pattern. All right, now last but not least, we have a block from Go Bold, and we have used our gemstone block from that book. We have rotated them, put them together, and it creates this gorgeous center star, which is really the focal point of this quilt. Now, let me just kind of mention one thing. When you're combining blocks from other patterns, you do want to keep the block size in mind. So each of these blocks would typically be the same finished size. However, I decided to throw a little extra in there, and I did use some blocks that were not the same size. So I have a way to solve that problem. We're going to get this on the table and we're going to show you exactly how I did that. So let's get it on the table and let's talk about it some more. My first choice was gemstones. Now, as you have been watching, you probably know that gemstones is one of my favorite patterns for 2024. I really, really love the way it came together. And I think it has a really dynamic block. So I actually pulled these blocks into my computer program, EQ, and started playing with them. And I realized that if I could rotate the blocks and put them together, it created this really cool star. So that was like my foundation and my building block for the rest of the quilt. Now let me show you this block because it looks totally different on this quilt than it does in the gemstone pattern. It's a 1-block quilt, gemstone is, but I used this block in our Showstopper here because, like I said, it rotated so well. Now this is a cool block. We basically have 2 half-square triangles going on here and then 2 half-square triangles in the opposite corners, but they're bordered on the 2 sides. So it really creates this cool dynamic block, and when you can rotate them and put them together, they create all kinds of cool designs. And that's why I chose it for the very center of our Showstopper so that we have this great star. I also put some kind of in the 4 corners of the star, not quite in the corners of the quilt, but surrounding the star, just to kind of give it a little bit extra oomph. I think it turned out great. Now, if you might notice, I have an example of gemstones behind me. Now, I actually made this quilt using a fat quarter bundle and a yard of No. 2 fabric. If you would like to learn how I did this, be sure to watch the video all about this quilt and my other quilts from the Go Bold with 3-Yard Quilts book. Now, the second block I chose for the quilt was from the Tempo pattern, which is from our Double Focus book. And I chose to use block B from this pattern, which really worked well. So let me show you the block on the quilt. And I'm going to lay it out right here on top of the quilt. Now, it kind of disappears among all of this because it creates such a great pattern around our star. And I really like the way that they were able to rotate I have 2 on each side and 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. And they just framed our star so beautifully. Now, I did take the fabric positioning and did a little something different with it. In the original tempo pattern, the block B is made with fabric 2 and 3. Well, I decided to make this block from fabric 1 and 2. That way it would pick up this beautiful floral, making this chain around our center star, and it picked up this fabric right here, because this is great. It's a great little diamond, a nice square, and then our tempo blocks just create the neat chain by rotating it around the star, making it very exciting and dynamic. Now, the third block that I chose to use was from our Quick Christmas book, and it is the Yuletide block. Now, we put these blocks in each corner of the quilt. I really liked them in the corner. I think it was a neat kind of repetition, a star in the corner, a great big star in the middle. I think it really added a lot of extra interest right here in these corners. Now, whenever I started working with the Yuletide block, though, it was just a little bit smaller finished size of this block than the rest of the blocks in the quilt. So I had to do a little something special. I'm going to get my cropping tool and I'm going to crop out the original block here, and then I'm going to show you that I added just a little bit extra, and we'll get into that in more detail in just a minute. But first, here is our Yuletide block. This is a beautiful block. I love the fact that it uses all 3 colors, the focus, the 2, and the number 3 in the block. I love that it's made with a stitch and flip technique, so there's no half square triangles. And it really has, I think, a lot of movement. It's almost like there's a windmill inside of the block, kind of giving it some movement. So it's very cool. What I did here is I added just a little bit of fabric here on the bottom, and then a little bit of fabric here on the side. Now, this fabric was added with the number 2 fabric so that it kind of blended all together, and you didn't notice that we've increased the extra background there. I think it worked really well. It was very easy to do, and we'll step that out in just a little bit. Now, our next block is from the Irish Christmas quilt, and this is also from the Quick Christmas book, kind of like our Yuletide block is. This was the perfect block to put the finishing touch on this quilt. It's a very cool block. So first, let me show you where that is here. I like this block because it's very versatile, and it comes together and makes so many cool designs. So here is our block. And this is so easy to do. It is the neatest thing. So half square triangle in this corner and in this corner. Then we have a 4 patch in this corner and a 4 patch in this corner. And it just creates this really great movement on your block. So whenever you put them together, if you rotate them like I've done here, it created this like really nice continuation of the line of your angle from your star. I thought it was the perfect thing. Now, the one thing with this block that I really had to play with a little bit, very similar to our Yuletide, is its finished size was not the same size as the other blocks. So once again, what I did is I added just a little bit of border on 2 sides. So I just took a strip of my fabric number 2, sewed it on the bottom, and then sewed it on the side so that the finished size match. So when I sew them all together, it works perfect. So really loved this. I thought it was the perfect block to finish the top off here, and I thought it was really great. Now, let's look at all of these blocks put together and arranged in our Showstopper 2025 quilt. Is this not just so amazing? I love it. Now, as you can see, the very center there, those are our gemstone blocks that are rotated to make the star. And then we also have the gemstone blocks, kind of those little arms jumping out on the top and the bottom. Very cute, gives it that look like the star is just radiating off the quilt. Now, in the middle of our star, or surrounding our star, are our tempo blocks, rotated to kind of create almost like a chain look around our star, which is very cool. I like the way that came together. Our Yuletide blocks are in the corner, giving it a nice anchor, and our Irish chain creating that point at the top just to top it off and give us that extra movement. It was really fun putting this together, and you know, it's really fun making these quilts too, because you kind of have different blocks and different things coming together. So it gives you a lot of fun. You're not just making the same block over and over. It kind of stretches you a little bit, and it gives you some really nice like little breaks. So I'm going to make these blocks and I only have 4 of these, and then I'm going to do this block. Really a lot of fun. Now, I mentioned earlier that I did use 2 blocks that were not the same size as my tempo and my gemstone blocks. So I'm going to step through now how I came up with how I did this. So first, our tempo and gemstone blocks both measured a 9-inch finished size, which was perfect. You could sew them together and the 9 inches matched up, and it was great. Now, my Yuletide block finished at 8.5. So here I have an example of our Yuletide block. So what I did is I added a 1-inch border to get a 9-inch finished block. Now, we need to take in consideration that seam allowance. So what I did is I need it to finish at 9. It currently finishes at 8.5. So I actually went through and subtracted the 8.5 from the 9. That's a 1/2 inch. So that's what I need to add on both sides. But with that 1/2 inch, I needed to add my seam allowance on both sides of the strip before I cut it. So I added a 1/4 inch on each side of the 1/2 inch, and that gave me a 1-inch strip. So whenever it all comes together, it's going to finish perfect. So what we have done here is my 1-inch strip. I just sewed it onto the bottom of the Yuletide. After I sewed it on, I trimmed it even here. Then I took another 1-inch strip and I sewed it on the side. After I sewed it on the side, I trimmed it even here. And then what this did is it gave me that same size as my other blocks so that I could put it together. Very, very simple, very easy to do. Now, let's step through the Irish Christmas block because it's slightly different here. Fun block, so easy to do. Now, this block finishes at 8 inches, whereas we need it to finish at 9 inches so that they all line up together. So our math was a little bit different on this one. So I need it to finish at 9. My block is 8 inches, so I've subtracted it from 9. That meant I needed to add 1 inch to the finished size of the block. Now, that's the finished size, so I need to add my seam allowance to that 1 inch, 1/4 inch on each side, which means I need to cut a 1.5 inch strip in order to get the block to finish at 9 inches. So here's our 8-inch block. I cut a 1.5 inch strip, just like this. Once again, I have sewn it to the bottom and trimmed it even. And then I took another strip and sewed it to the side and then trimmed that even. And whenever it all came together, it will finish off at 9 inches. Now you'll notice I only put it on 2 sides. This makes it easy. You don't have to worry about going all the way around. 2 sides is enough, and because I used my fabric too, it all blended into the background beautifully. No trouble at all. So if you're trying to combine blocks from different patterns that aren't the same size, here's a summary. Take desired finished block size, subtract the block size that you're working with, then add a 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides, which equals a 1/2 inch. This will give you the total width of the strip you will cut. And then you can make your showstopper quilt from any pattern that you want. Now, if you don't want to worry about the math, don't worry. We've got you covered. We have a great handout on our website. Just go to fabriccafe.com and hit the free goodies tab. The handout will be there, and it tells you what size strips you will need to cut for the Yuletide and the Irish Christmas blocks to make them perfectly the right size. It also tells you how many strips you're going to need to cut for these blocks, as well as your borders and your binding. We'll also find the instructions for adding the borders to your blocks, as well as a full-size colored quilt diagram to show you how to arrange your blocks. That's a lot of stuff on a free goodie. Now let's take a look at the fabric that we use for our showstopper because it's gorgeous. I love all of these colors in this fabric. We have just jewel tone colors all in our floral and our leaves here, all on a black background. The florals have a little bit of texture to them as well, and it really is an elegant, elegant fabric. And if you're like me, I love all these bright colors. I just think they really pop off the background. And of course, this is our #1 fabric. We have used it in all of our blocks, our gemstone, our tempo, our Yuletide, our Irish Christmas block, and it's wonderful. I really, really love how this pops against our #2 and our #3. So our #2, we used a really nice soft white that has some texture and dimension. And as you can see, it's all in our background here. And then for our #3 fabric, wowie kazowie, this #3 fabric in this really brilliant royal blue has lots of, it almost looks like brush marks from a paintbrush or something. And I like it because it kind of picks up some of the gradations in the flowers themselves. This blue is what is giving our pop to the quilt. It really balances the focus and the #2 fabric. It creates our points, our border here. Really, really scrumptious, very good. Now, because we have taken our quilt blocks from different 3-yard quilt patterns and put them all together, this does use more than just 3 yards. Because let me explain, when we design a typical 3-yard pattern, we are very careful to make sure we get 3 1-yard cuts to finish the pattern. But because we've pulled from all different places, it does require a little more. So you will need 2 kits in order to make the showstopper, or 6 yards of fabric if you're doing your own. It's perfect. Now the kit information for this one is called Vivid Blooms. Now I have a couple of other images that I want to share with you using different fabrics because I think this quilt looks great in all kinds of fabrics. Our first one here is done in greens and browns and that nice ecru with a little texture to it. Wow, doesn't this look great? I really love the way the star still really pops off of this. Those Yuletide stars in the corner are so cool, and that awesome diagonal movement. Now this kit is called Hidden Glen. Now the next one that I have to share with you, so fun. It's purples and greens, 2 shades of purples and a wonderful green texture. And wow, doesn't the purple, the #3 purple just pop off of the surface of this. I think it is amazing. I love the way it really shows off the star and then the green with the diamond in the middle. Oh, it's so fun. This one is a really pretty one. Now this kit is called Seafoam Dance. Combining quilt blocks like this is a great way to use all of your patterns and books and create something new. Just pick blocks that are the same size or use that block bordering trick we talked about. If you make this quilt, I would love to see a picture. Send your pictures of your quilt to welisten@fabriccafe.com. And if you would like some more inspiration on how to combine different blocks to make a unique quilt, be sure to watch the video that pops up. Happy quilting!